This podcast provides a platform for our guests to share their experiences and inspire our listeners to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams. As you listen, we invite you to explore how these concepts apply to your own story. You know what to do. Be great and be grateful. We're mic'd up with Mike DeChocho. Today's episode features Jacki Roach, a process improvement strategist from South Buffalo, New York. Her past career in news media production, combined with an MBA in global supply chain management, have inspired a unique awareness of our labor environments. Jacki is a futurist, quantum science enthusiast, and lifelong learner. All right, I'm excited to have Jacki Roach on the show today. This is going to be packed with a lot of, let's call it value, but simply what I'm excited about is I don't know exactly where this is going to go, right? We talked a little bit.
Always a windy road with me.
We talked about it off camera a little bit, and we call it a skeleton of what we'd like to talk about, but I think what I'm most excited is in the conversations we've had so far, you don't know where it's going to take you, right? And I think what I want to talk about first, what I think would bring the most value to our listeners is talk about connections, right? So one of the reasons that we're doing this, the reason this podcast is even happening is through a connection. So I'm going to give a shout out to Maria Bond,
yes.
Right? I happened to be grabbing a coffee, working on a project, and I saw her working on graphic design. Maria and I went to high school together, and
Maria and I had a design business together.
Look at that.
We used to do stationery design together.
Awesome.
Well, now she still does. She does amazing wedding designs and stuff like that.
I'm learning something new every day.
Yeah. Maria is actually a very aspirational character in my life. She's someone that, once we went to college together, and then when we reconnected, she's someone that just, she knows what works for her life. She goes and gets it, where I'm I have to go on every detour and every dead end to make sure that this was the way. So she really kind of helps me. And it's funny because maybe that's why when she said your name and you were kind of putting feelers out for a design intern or something like that.
Right.
And I have, not been working for a few months now. So, when we were originally going in that direction, maybe that's what it was. Maria's got this steadfast kind of clear direction, and maybe the antenna went off and was Jacki needs to meet this guy and this needs to start happening. So you never know.
Yeah, I definitely felt connected at the time. I didn't know where that conversation would lead Maria and I just put it out there. And then I think it was a couple weeks later, I get a message on Instagram from Jacki, and she's like, yeah, let's definitely talk and see where it leads. And it's funny because the initial conversation was, I don't want to call it an interview necessarily, but it was supposed to be more of hey, show me your resume.
Right.
What kind of graphic design have you done? What are you creating? What are you looking to do? I wanted to make sure, number one, most important thing for me was, would it be a good fit? Are you is your why or your purpose for doing it something that I was, felt like I'd be connected to?
Right.
What I think is cool to share with our audience is that conversation really, we did have that conversation, but what was cool is there was so much more behind it, right?
Well, and I really, I have to say thank you for that conversation because, just for background here, I left my career of 12 years at the beginning of this year. And since then, I've really been trying to find where I'm going into and what I want to do. And I've gone on a few interviews where I've just been way too deep, right, to begin with. I just wanted to know what the core of this business was and how they do their things. And is it right? Is it corrupt at the top? And that's kind of a little crazy for people. And so when I met you and you were open to, when your first question to me was, it's great to bring you on or to maybe do something together, but how can I serve you? Or how can we make sure you're getting the most out of this position? That's not really common when you're going on job interviews or looking to connect with someone. But I think, and we've talked about this before, I think both of us recognize that sort of the way business is going, the way advertising is going, it really is a deeper connection with your brand and with your audience, and not so much about this product that you sell, but about what you stand for and who you are, and to build a really good team. I think you recognize the value in that more so than people I typically meet.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went in there thinking, okay, let's see what Jacki's all about and see if she'd be a good fit on the team. And I left there extremely inspired because it was something, I don't know if you want to say it was spiritual, but it was just a way that you were giving off an energy that was really refreshing, right?
Thank you.
It was like completely different than, and that's why I'm so excited that we're doing this podcast. And part of this whole thing, I feel like I want to just tell like a quick side note that 3 weeks ago we didn't know we'd be sitting here doing this, and here we are. And
a month ago we were strangers.
A month ago we were strangers. 3 weeks ago we talked about maybe a podcast, and now we're making it happen.
Well, and I think that's a great point to make to people. I said this earlier. Fake in or fake out, fake in. If you're going to be fake with people, don't expect real connections or real relationships. You're going to get fake, vague, surface level things back. And in a month, because we were open and vulnerable with each other and really just real at the end of the day, genuine and real, we accomplished in a month what takes some people or has taken other relationships in my life years to get to,
I agree. I mean, it just felt natural. It felt real. I didn't feel like you were, I think I told you my whole story on the first time, which I knew you were ready to receive it. I told you the story about why I started my business, and for me to be like, oh, you want to do graphic design and work for my company, potentially work with me here. It didn't make sense for me to just say, these are the 3 tasks I need. Or this by Friday, I need something that looks like this. That wasn't the place I was in. The place I was in was, let me share who I am, and if you're interested in what I'm doing and the purpose of my company and why I wake up and do what I do every day. If you're on the same wavelength or like just feeling that energy, then let's talk. And then you, instead of just being like yes or no or showing a level of interest, you were just talking about things on you hit me like.
On like a cosmic
She referred
level.
to it as Hurricane Jacki earlier.
Yeah, Hurricane Jacki came through. I think a lot of people, they come into conversations.
I wasn't ready for it, and I was like, oh my God, like the way she's thinking about things and, like uncovering. It was almost like, if something's here, you weren't, okay, that's what it is, and we got to do it. It was not so much challenging why everything is the way it is, but you were looking to like have an understanding and like
I can sum up my life.
How do you explain that?
Okay, here's my life. Did you ever have to take a test and the question was you have 4 multiple choices? Which one best describes this answer? Right. I hated questions like that because it wasn't just, all of them were right, but what was the rightest? What was the truest? What was, and things like that have plagued me, I guess, my whole life. It's been difficult for me to make certain decisions because I don't know if that's like at its core, the true kernel. Like I'm always picking another layer back and, don't get me wrong, that can be obsessive. But at the same token, it's just kind of funny. Like I've never really been able to not go there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like throughout life, I've had to learn tact, I guess. Sorry.
It's okay.
But tact and like coming across to people and wanting, because my objective is always to get into these deep subjects. Mm-hmm. But some people aren't ready to go there, and it can be disrespectful at times. So, for even for myself, I have to be like cognizant of that constantly. Right.
And I think the reason we connected so well right from the get-go was I think you saw that I was encouraged when I heard, like, obviously I kept the conversation moving forward, and if I wanted more, you would give me more, and then you would ask me questions and kind of heard more about my story. So it felt very natural, and then it also felt like, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I just felt like so on purpose when I unloaded all of it. You know what I mean? Like, it made me reevaluate why I do what I do. Just the way that the detail that you had, going back to purpose driven and talking about, connections. We even had a conversation. Was it our first time we got together? We started talking about our connection with Jesus and God and just overall having that. I mean, we went there. I went there.
Oh my goodness.
I'm going there because I'm, what are we afraid about? we talked about fear earlier today, and I'm doing a podcast here.
There's opportunity and fear.
There's opportunity and fear. Do you want to talk about that more?
Okay, well, I mean, I feel like you let the cat out of the bag, so I have to go there.
How about, are you okay with sharing your, your recent story about...
I guess I'll put it this way.
Maybe internally what you were going through?
I guess I'd probably just speak about it sort of vaguely right now, and I know I'm up here saying realness, but at the same time, like I said, recognizing that some people are just not ready to handle some of the experiences I've been through. And so to just kind of blast it out to everyone, it's not that I'm afraid of being real. It's just that sometimes that realness comes at a price. And for someone like me, my whole life, I've been really into theoretical physics and, quantum mechanics and figuring out spirituality. I've taken a lot of theology classes, philosophy courses. I mean, this is explaining why I'm here, what the purpose of life is. Has been on my mind forever, since I was a little kid.
Really?
Yeah, I had a lot of
You always were looking for why. Like if someone told you XYZ, you were kind of wondering why is that?
To be honest, this is a story I've never told out loud, and it's something I've kind of like recently come to terms with, but I think, like, the news had a huge effect on me. Like, when I was little, I was an emotional kid or whatever people would say. But I was really funny and I was really entertaining because the news, like, my dad worked at the newspaper, my mom worked there, my brother worked there, my uncles worked there. Like, everybody was in news media. Mm-hmm. And it was important to know the news and be up on things. And it was on the television, and Court TV was just coming out at the time, And I would see these little clips of things happening and, picture a 5-year-old kid. This was my real life. My parents my mom can back this story up. I would go to sleep in all my clothes and sneakers. I had a bag packed next to the door in case there was a fire, in case there was a hurricane, in case there was an emergency. I literally at 5 years old was terrified there would be an emergency. My mom worked overnights. I would beg her not to leave because I was afraid she was just going to die.
Is it because
for no
of
reason.
the things you were seeing on the news?
A lot of them
reading,
were.
Reading it in
to this day, not reading. I mean, seeing it on the news a lot.
5 years old, so
5 years. This was the thing. When I was 5, there was like a tropical storm or something, a hurricane, and they interviewed this guy outside, and he was in his underwear. And they were interviewing him, and his whole house was gone or whatever. And I remember at 5 seeing that and being like, I'm never going to be interviewed in my underwear. Or if this happens, I'm a little kid putting this together. Yeah. And then, it just kind of went from there.
That's wild.
I remember in like 2nd or 3rd grade, the firefighters came to our school to talk to us about fire safety. The next week was like, Mom, I need a roll-out ladder in my bedroom in case there was a fire. I mean, I had anxiety when I was like really, really little. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were like tons of other, my parents, I think to this day, my parents probably questioned whether I should have seen like a child psychologist or something like that. But I think what was funny is what I ended up doing, I became aware enough that expressing these fears is distressing to other people, and especially to adults that don't have any idea how to tell an 8-year-old that, things are going to be okay when everything on TV is saying it's not, Right. I thought my parents had AIDS, and I didn't even know what AIDS was. I had no idea how it was transmitted. I just was pretty sure my parents had it and were going to die from it, So, I mean, and that was probably at 9 or 10 because MTV was talking about it.
And it has to be tough from your parents' perspective, too, because, you don't know what you don't know, and then for them to, like, try to...
And I learned how to cover it up.
Get you through it, and if you're covering
with
it
humor.
up... Yeah.
Which I think...
So do you feel, can you share with us how, as you started to get a little bit older and maybe, were able to either seek help or your parents were... Just talk a little bit about as you went on, like through maybe your 10 up until your teens, how did you get through that? Or do you still feel like you very much have that now? Or?
I think maybe what... Up and through grade school, I was pretty deep. But like I said, I learned how to use comedy as a shield, to be an entertainer. It doesn't matter what goes on behind closed doors. You can project this out. But then in high school, I was actually like bullied really, really bad. And then I was like really screwed because it was like I knew inside I was messed up. Now I was getting signals that my outside is apparently totally messed up too, and this isn't going to fit in either. And it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I remember going home and this is also, AOL Instant Messenger is just getting big. People are just having email accounts. So it was kind of this weird bullying stage where it wasn't necessarily like classic bullying, like when I hear an older generation talk about it and they're like, come on, it's just bullying. I'm like, yeah, but you used to go home. Like it happened on your way home from school or whatever, at school, and then you got to go
escape.
Yeah, you had an escape. And I was kind of like in this guinea pig year where that escape window was narrowing because there were chain emails going out, or I would walk into school and found out somebody they had mimicked my screen name to make the 2 L's in it to capital I's, and they were instant messaging people and, just saying horrific things. And pretending to be me, saying these things that were like, I was a lot heavier when I was in high school. Can you bring me food tomorrow? Or just like terrible things. And when I didn't even want to admit that I was so embarrassed by how I looked that I didn't even want to admit to anyone that this was happening. Because if I admitted it happened, then I had to admit that,
it almost like reaffirm that,
yeah, they were right.
You acknowledged it or something.
And I remember, honestly, one of the most impactful things that's helped me throughout my whole life, I come from a very strong lineage of Irish Catholic women who don't put up with nothing. And my mom, when my mom finally learned it was happening or whatever, she said to me, Jack, you can't worry about those people because they're going to be on the same bar stool their father fell off of. And I was like,
so true.
But what's so crazy about it, and maybe that, and maybe people will be offended by that, whatever. My mom certainly won't be offended that you're offended. But, then when I would get made fun of on the bus or when it was happening, I would think to myself, like, I go home and my parents love each other and they love me and they love my brother and I have good friends. This person gets on this bus every day to torment somebody that they don't even know, that's done nothing to them, and probably does have a really messed up home life, or otherwise you don't act like that. So my whole life then I became the observer. I stopped I couldn't stop the emotions from happening, and I would deal with them a lot at my house or on my own, but because I looked at it from what could this person possibly be going through that's making them do this now.
You were thinking that even at a young age?
And that was 13, 14, 15,
That's
But that was the only way I could keep the situation contained. You know what I mean?
So that, to help you from just having...
Because I didn't want to talk about it.
Anger and kind of that's great, insight for even 13 or, through your high school years, like you were saying. So I want to kind of stay there for a second.
Okay.
And that's not somewhere I thought we were going to go, but it's okay. That's why we're doing this podcast, is to get this out. And if we can help one person, Jackie and I agreed off camera that this is worth doing, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's one person listening right now that can take anything from what we say, and we hope that we're bringing you value in doing so. But so in that situation, right? So, and it wasn't a one-time occurrence. It was something that was consistent. So your mom's statement about, they're going to just be right where their parents are, and they're, basically that tells me no personal growth, or the inspiration is low on that side, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, obviously you never want to hear about someone or see someone or ever know that someone's gone through the things that, and you told me a little bit about that too, I think during maybe our first time or second conversation we had. And I just felt so broken hearing those stories about what you had to experience. And then, we're about the same age. So I had the same thing, AOL, and, you can't escape it. And now the reason I want to stay on this topic is now I feel like it's even amplified more, social media could be a great tool, especially for business, right?
Yeah.
But it could also, in a situation of bullying, could be very tough. And, what you were dealing with can even be amplified through like higher technology now. Like more, people are not connected anymore. Like kids it's terrible, like to say that bullying could be going on anytime, right?
Well, and and honestly, to your bigger point, and I see a lot of anti-bullying campaigns and I see a lot of things where I always kind of want to like chime in from the side of like someone who lived through it. And to me, we focus so much on victims, mental health, emotional health. How are they dealing with it? I very rarely see any investigation into why the bully is that way. Mm-hmm. And that kid is just as broken. Mm-hmm. And my heart almost goes, and maybe it's colored by the fact that is how I, made sense of the situation. But my heart goes more to that kid, because if we can stop the problem from happening at its source, then nobody would be bullied downstream. But
that's phenomenal. That's what I was where I wanted to go with it. So the two things, it's one, talking about, someone in that situation, how it can be amplified. And it's also then going back, looking at the person who is so hurt that they've they're probably not doing it, even being that thoughtful about it, but they're hurting inside, and so this is a message that's just out to the world right now that, if you feel like maybe you're doing things and being hurtful to someone, and whether that's having a bad day at work and going home and talking to your spouse and being really angry, and all of a sudden you're like, why am I angry at them? I'm giving them, it could be that layer, it could be deeper, it could be years of bullying. And for you to say that right now, I know you're not looking, you didn't say it because you're looking for the accolades behind it, but someone to get, bullied over the years and then say, hey, you know what? Stop. Why are they doing it? Instead of like, hey, let's get that kid kicked out of school. Mm-hmm. At 13 years old, you're saying, why are they doing it?
Right, exactly. And then like even beyond that, when you're saying like hurting people or hurt, behind hurt is always anger. The kernel of anger outsourced is hurt. So even now, like when I'm angry about something, I even say to myself, what are you hurt by? What emotionally is this? What emotion is this? Is it fear? Is it loneliness? Is it like, what negativity is around this? And why are you projecting it angry? Why are you making it someone else's fault or someone else's... I keep hitting that thing, sorry. But really what it comes back, I always try to rewind and say, if I can change this from the inside out first, if I can change my inside, the outside will be reflected back to me. Mm-hmm. Where so often in the beginning of my life, the first up until now was really like, if I can get these external things to line up perfectly, then the inside should change, or then like I should come along with it. But it's really been totally different. The exact opposite.
So you took that experience or those experiences and used it for something that you can learn and apply, which I think is amazing, because something that I always like to, and I've learned this through listening to podcasts as well, is everything, if you really look at it where everything happens for you and not to you, mm-hmm. It's really difficult during a time like being bullied, or if you lose a close family member, or you have a health problem yourself and you're like, why is this happening to me? Why me? Why me? Or why them? Why is this innocent child having this, bully pick on them? But if, and as you get a little bit older, and you had insight at a 13-year-old that I think some 23-year-olds may not have, right? And so you looked at it as, what, I can learn from this. So the way I say that is, everything happens for me, not to me. When you look at it that way, then you can do something with that information. You can figure out, when I have a bad day, what can I learn from it? Can it make me a better person? Can I use that tough experience? And it's hard to say, because as I mentioned, it could be losing a child. It could be a health problem. It could be mm-hmm. losing your job. And you're like, how could that ever have happened for me? That's a horrendous situation. That's not any good,
Yeah.
And you can play the woe is me, but when you're down, you're not gaining anything from it. So you got to get back up off the mat, and you have to dust yourself off, right? And the quicker you do that process and get right back to it. But it's important, one of the things you're talking about is is either reflection in the moment or what you've learned from it. So then you can ask yourself, hey, deep down inside, if I'm ever angry, is it what's causing it?
Yeah.
So I can take care of it so it doesn't turn into a bigger situation. Or I'm maybe not being mean to someone. Maybe you're not bullying them to that degree. But so that, I think, is a great story that I hope our listeners are, I know they'll get benefit out of that.
And if I was just going to add anything to that, and not to put you on blast or anything, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to the quicker I would get over this. But sometimes it's not about the speed, it's about the quality of getting over it. And I even feel now,
absolutely,
like even the more I've gone on in my life, the older I've gotten, like the same situations or the same scenarios or like familiar feelings, they come back, another cycle of it, another round of it, and it's another layer that you can peel back, another, so it never stops, it never ends. We're always in a continuous improvement cycle. And probably the biggest thing I've learned in the last 2 years is really to look at my life not so much linearly, but to see it as a cycle and to be on a continuous improvement and, evaluating yourself and not just being, kind of unconsciously driven by something else.
Yeah, there's no end game. There's no finish line.
Right.
Constant improvement and figuring out how you can be the best version of yourself. And something we talked about earlier, I don't think we got it on the podcast yet, that I'd like to talk about is... you mentioned support. We talked about connections and being connected with people, whether that's in business, networking, making new friends, doing a podcast with each other. But talk about, the importance of having a supporting cast. Maybe it's in business, but you were talking earlier about family, friends.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I think a lot of times, like when I quit my job and I kind of thought that I was going to be right into something within another, couple months, and it didn't work out that way. For a lot of different reasons, but it really came down to, for someone who never wanted to rely on other people, who always wanted to be independent, who always wanted to take care of myself, to come to a point where I really had to throw my hands up in the air and say, I need help. I need help from my mom or from my close friends or from people who have supported me for a long time. And it's so scary to lean into that and to trust that people are going to be there. And even people that weren't even so close to me. I mean, you've supported me, and I've only known you for 4 weeks, but that was right what I needed at that time. So, there's a lot of divine timing going on, a lot of those situations. And that's, I guess, going back to what we were saying, when you put real out, the more real you can put out, the higher quality support you're going to get because people understand you better. A lot of it is, even for myself, even in that bullying scenario, I held all those emotions on to me. So no one else even knew where I was to even try to help me or try to support me, So a lot of times it's just being real with yourself and being real with other people, and the support will be there.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. One other thing I wanted to kind of end on, because I think that's a really strong statement. We talked about connections, purpose-driven, community, influences and inspirations, but something that was talked about earlier too, and again, I'd like to get it quote unquote on the air, is when you have information, something that you kind of taught me that, so, I feel something I gained obviously from our friendship and our conversations was if you have information and you kind of sit on it. So it could be this podcast. If you learned something from us today and you feel you can help a friend out, we encourage you to do that. That's why I'm doing this right here, right? That's why.
Did I say it to you? The sin is to know.
The sin is to know and not do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you feel you can help somebody out, and maybe it's yourself first, right? You got to help yourself,
yes.
Love yourself before you can give love, right? And you know that. Or you read a book. Sometimes I've felt this way too. You read a book, and then you gotta take action. What do you do with it?
Yeah, if you're not applying it.
Can you wrap that thought up and kind of put a bow on this episode for us?
The sin is to know. I always kind of go back to thinking Eve eating the apple, and it's but why was knowing such a problem? And really it's because if you have all that knowledge and then you don't do something, or you don't right the wrong, or you don't, what good was it for you to know it, for you to seek it out, for you to get that, if you're going to do nothing with it, what's the point of knowing? I mean, I don't know if that's exactly it, but
no, I think that's strong. It's being mindful about taking that information and doing doing good with it. Right?
Yeah.
And again, one of the reasons for having this conversation, and we've had a few of these off camera that were, extremely strong conversations because we just let that flow.
Yeah.
And we felt, that information we were giving each other was helping the other person out.
Yeah.
At least that's how I always felt. I felt like when you weren't speaking to speak. You were giving me insight. You were giving me reflection points. You were, giving me sometimes advice about, hey, this would be a great opportunity for you. You should try this. And it meant a lot to me because I knew you weren't speaking just to say it. You were speaking from a place of,
well, thank
truth.
you. I appreciate picking that up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So thank you for your time and being here today. And I'm real excited again.
Mic'd up, jacked
we're mic'd
up.
up, jacked up. And hey, thank you guys for tuning in, checking it out. If someone would be interested in, maybe following you.
Yes. So I have my personal
account. How can people get in touch?
I have my personal account on Instagram, which is Jacki_Roach. And then I also am kind of launching my own thing soon, which is going to be whelmness.com. That's WHELMNESS.com. And that's going to more to follow on that.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. It's been awesome.
Right. Hey guys, this is Mike DeChocho, and I wanted to personally thank you for tuning in, for being part of my journey. Together we can make a positive impact in the world. You can check out more show notes and information at mikeduppodcast.com, powered by Social Chameleon. I encourage you to take any of the stories or insights discussed for my show and use it as your personal ammunition. I love the quote from Gandhi, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Transmit grace and love. It may be as simple as holding open the door for a stranger at the supermarket or thanking an employee for a job well done. Every interaction you have with another person today is an opportunity for you to make someone smile, laugh, and to feel happiness. You know what to do. Be great and be grateful.